Cloud Atlas is a film that I really wanted to watch when I first heard it was put into production because I read the book and I really loved it. So I thought I really wanted to see what they would do with the material. And the ultimate feeling I got is that this is probably the best film that I've seen in the entirety of 2013, and that includes everything from February when this was released in England and when I saw it to where we are now, up in the middle of June. And it's essentially a film about philosophy and about all the themes that affect a person's life and how a person's life can affect someone else's, even if it's 500 years in the future. And this film tries to tell that story in a really interesting way, and in a way that the book doesn't. The book essentially tells each story in halves. It tells it tells each story in halves for the first half, and then in the second half it tells the final half. But it also hints at elements of other storylines in different stories. There are 6 stories, and it manages to incorporate different elements of each story into the other stories to sort of make them feel like they belong. But the film doesn't really do it in the same way as the book. The book merely hints at elements from each story merging into the other. The film shows that these actions that these characters take and the things that they do are all important. Every action is important because it causes these rifts in uh, the actions of people in the future, and the things that happen in the past can reverberate hundreds of years, and that these themes that we live by, these tenets that we live by, like faith, religion, love, family, and freedom, they all carry across through hundreds of years. It's a film that is dynamic in the fact that it's got these directors who clearly wanted to tell this story. It's got these directors that knew what they were doing. They had had experience in telling telling stories through films that were completely unusual. Because the Wachowski siblings did both the Matrix trilogy and Speed Racer, and these films aren't really considered conventional movies. So they knew what they were doing with Cloud Atlas, and that's why I think I absolutely loved it, because it manages to tell these 6 stories with this group of actors who are playing different parts in each story, but it never sounds cheesy, it never feels wrong. It just feels like they're telling this grand picture. They're painting this big picture that has so many different parts, and they all come together at the end to create something wonderful. And I think it's sort of like an epic poem in a way, because there's so many things going on. There's so many little stories happening uh, in this big story that it really feels like you're going on a journey. And I think as a film, it's just wonderful in telling the grand themes and conveying them to the audience so that it will create a strong emotional reaction. And I think this film really does have some very powerful moments, both individually and the ultimate sensation you get when you finish watching the film. Because the last 40 minutes just really build and build and build to this grand crescendo. It's really a film that wants you to understand its message, and it spends a lot of time ensuring that you do. It's a hard film to follow in the first 45 minutes because it tells different snippets from all 6 stories. But once you've got this understanding of the characters and the stories that you're following, it's actually quite easy to follow. So for the rest of the film, which is another 2 hours, it's a 2 hour and 50-minute film. Uh, you essentially know what you're looking out for, and you're watching this film and you're really enjoying the build up and the relationships, and essentially you're enjoying the fact that these filmmakers are trying to teach you something. They're trying to convey messages that are in conventional films, but they're not in conventional films the same way they're in this film. This film really displays themes in a much grander scale, which can make it seem quite cheesy or cliche, but really it's just more impressive to me because they convey these themes so brilliantly that it's really easy to read them, and you really do get moved by them. For instance, there's a story about a composer who goes to Edinburgh to work for another composer who's slipping into senility thanks to syphilis, and he's quite frail. And it's a story essentially about this young man who wants to be the next big thing, but he doesn't really understand what it takes to get that far. And it's sort of like a wake-up call. And the young composer is played by Ben Whishaw. And the end of the story is so incredibly tragic that you get this reaction to it that's so it's like a gut punch. It really is this very emotional story, and Ben Whishaw's fantastic in it. In fact, most of the cast in this film is really good. Tom Hanks loves hamming it up in this film, but I think when the moment requires, he knows exactly how to portray a scene when he needs to be serious. So I think it's a very clever picture, and ultimately I loved it because it's just so different from anything you'll ever watch. It's a really just smart, well put together, edited movie that is directed with flair. It's written well, and one of the best things about it is the score for it is fantastic, and it's also done by Tom Tykwer. It's just great, and I really encourage you to go see it. And obviously, I'm going to give this film a 10 out of 10.